The bazaar reeked of iron and cold fat, a smell that stuck to skin the way gossip clings to a small town. Frost rimed the awnings, turning frayed canvas into glass. I kept my chin down and my white braid hidden in the hood, though the color betrayed me anyway. People always notice what they fear. Mothers tugged children away. A butcher paused mid-swing, cleaver lifted over a haunch, just to stare at me like I'd wandered in from a bad omen. My name is Neva. In my village, it used to be whispered as a warn. Today, they brought me to the square at first light, before the sun could make a scene of me. Rope chafed my wrists. My father had polished his boots. My mother had painted her mouth a brave red. They stood a pace away as if proximity might stain them. Across the stones, a caravan had arrived in silence, pale hounds steaming in the cold, banners like torn snow. Everyone knew whose crest that was, even if they pretended they didn't. The Frost Court. The man at its center wore white not like a shroud but like authority itself. Kalen, the Frostborn Alpha King, vampire, wolf, legend. The air went thinner as he stepped from the sled. Even the butcher lowered his cleaver. My father cleared his throat the way he did when asking for credit. She's strong, he told the envoy nearest the king. And unspoiled. I flinched at the word. Unspoiled is what you say about milk. Or a lamb. Not a girl who can name every wind by the way it whistles through broken boards. Kalen's gaze found me without hurry, as if he'd been tracking me by a scent no one else could smell. Silver irises, winter caught in metal. The crowd's murmur drained away. He didn't look disgusted. He looked certain. Untie her, he said. The rope fell as if it had been embarrassed to touch me. My mother made a sound like a door closing. Price? My father asked, clutching at the math of things to keep from drowning in the moment. Kalen didn't blink. You mistake me, he said mildly. She is not a thing you can sell. She is a vow I have come to keep. Laughter pricked the back of my throat and died there. A vow? To me? The hounds shifted, their breath rising like ghosts. Kalen lifted a cloak from his own shoulders and set it over mine. It smelled of snow and something iron-sweet. Weight pinned me to the present. Walk, he said, not to drag, not to command a dog. To invite. My feet moved anyway. Behind us, coins never changed hands. Only the wind did. The square exhaled as the sled rattled toward the white road, and I did not look back. The forest beyond our valley wore winter-like armor. Branches carried glassy ribs of ice, and the river ran under a roof of breath. Kalen sat opposite me in the sled, a storm arranged into a man, perfectly still. I hid my raw wrists in the fur he'd given and watched his hounds, wolves, really, though larger than any I'd heard sung about, eat the distance with tireless strides. Do they bite? I asked, because silence makes fear grow teeth. When asked, he said, and the smallest ghost of humor fogged the air between us. Up close, he wasn't young, and he wasn't old. He was carved. His skin held the clarity of cold water. His mouth was made for pronouncements, and, maddeningly, for gentleness. Those silver eyes studied the world like it was a problem he intended to solve by will alone. Why me? I blurted, hating the child sound of it. Because you are moon-marked, he said. And because I am done letting cowards define the sacred. Sacred. The word rattled inside my ribs. I had been called many things. Sacred was not one of them. The village calls it a curse, I said softly. He looked past me, into a history I could not see. Villages teach smallness. Blood remembers scale. The sled climbed, snow hissing under runners. Mountains shouldered up ahead, their throats cut with blue ice. When we crested the last bend, his stronghold appeared. A palace not built but revealed, as if the mountain had been hollowed by a careful giant. Bridges leapt like frozen rivers between spires. Windows breathed pale fire. I forgot to be afraid. Inside, warmth came from flames that burned white, from stones that hummed faintly when Kalen brushed them with his palm. People bowed the way wheat bows to weather. Some wore the marks of wolves at their throats, some flashed teeth a shade too sharp. None spoke to me. He led me into a chamber with walls as clear as lake ice. The sky pressed close. A bed of carved crystal waited like a dare. I stopped sharp enough to make the cloak sway around my knees. This is a mistake, I managed. I am nobody. You are the reason a very old promise didn't die, he said simply, and when he took my shackled hands to examine the burns, my skin lit faintly under his touch, as if someone struck flint along my veins. I yanked away with a breath I couldn't own. He watched the glow fade with a soldier's patience and a believer's certainty. Moonborn, he murmured. At last. Sleep arrived in pieces, like snow falling through a crack in the roof. Between them, I tasted memories that were not mine, a younger Kayla kneeling in winter, arms full of a pale woman whose mouth would never warm again, a hall of onlookers whose fears sang in harmony, a crown that felt like handcuffs. I woke with my heart galloping and found him sitting in shadow, as if a king could be a night watchman when it mattered. You dreamt, he said, the words not a question. I stole your ghosts, I whispered. Sorry. His mouth slanted. They do not mind being remembered. Later, he took me to a council, because politics always arrive when destiny does. A ring of advisors measured me the way tailors do, for weaknesses. Lady Isra, all ice and exactness, let her gaze linger on the white lashes that made my eyes look red in certain light. Pretty toy, said one man too gently to be kind. I felt my temper stir from where I keep it folded. I am not a toy, I said. And I am tired of being looked at like a riddle with a wrong answer. Kalen didn't touch me. He didn't need to. You will correct your tongue in my hall, he told the man, and silence fell so hard the torches flickered. After, in the corridor that smelled faintly of pine resin and snow iron, I found the question that kept gnawing. What if I refuse what you think I am? He studied my hands, not my face. Then I fail more gently, he said. I protect you anyway. You don't own me. He accepted the wound of it with a nod. No. But the bond that woke when I touched you owns either of us. It binds or it burns. I have tried to live without it. The world frayed. He left me with bread and broth and too much space to think. When the first tremor ran through the mountain, I thought it was my pulse. The second rattled crystal in its settings. A horn answered from the eastern wall. The palace inhaled like a single creature. What is it? I asked a passing guard. Hunters, she said, eyes widened with a zeal that wasn't fear. They've found the moon mark. Me then. Always me. War looks slow from stories. In truth it happens like weather, you look up and the sky is already different. We reached the battlements to find the black shapes of hunters spilling across the snowfield, ruined blades shouldered like arguments. At their center strode a magus with a staff capped by a shard that seemed to drink the light around it. Kalen stood on the wall as if it had been cut to fit his boots. You cross my border knowing my law, he called. Turn and live. Give us the girl. The magus answered, voice magnified by wind. And we will let your empire starve peacefully. Kalen laughed then, soft, disbelieving. You mistake hunger for discipline. He lifted his palm. The mountain woke. Lines of pale power webbed the ice beneath our feet. The first clash sounded like bells breaking. Vampires moved the way good knives think, efficiently. Wolves tore the flanks. The hunters were trained for this, answering each shadow with silver inscribed in old languages. I should have stayed behind stone. Instead I leaned into the rail to see, and the rail, brittle with hoarfrost, betrayed me. I fell. The world punched the breath from me. Pain flared in my shoulder like bad lightning. A hunter saw the white of my hair against the snow and shouted something that meant prize. He ran. 3 more with him. I scrambled. The ground invented new ways to be slippery. Kalen dropped between us like a sentence, blade meeting ruin with a shriek that set my teeth on edge. Another hunter's knife flashed. Kalen moved and the world blurred. But the third had a clear path, straight to me. Fear flung my hands up. Light answered. Not yellow fire, not red. White, the color of cold stars. It leapt from my palms as if it had waited there all my life, seared across the hunter's chest, and unstitched the runes from his steel. He folded without finishing his breath. Silence found a small circle around us. Even the wolves stared. Kalen's eyes were wide in a way I hadn't yet seen. Not afraid. Found. Moonfire, he said, reverent as prayer. I shook. Heat coursed under my skin, a river that did not scald me but could kill him. Isra's voice knifed down from the wall. My king, her touch will unmake you. Then I will learn new ways to be made, he answered, and the battle surged back in. I woke later in a room that remembered the shape of my breath. Bandages laced my shoulder, salve stung pleasantly. Kalen sat where sleep refuses kings, beside the bed, armor undone to the truth of a throat and the tired curve of a mouth that had ordered death and mercy by equal measures. You burned yourself nearly hollow, he said quietly. The first time is clumsy. The second time is hungry. I stared at my hands. And the third? Chosen, he said. I tasted the word like a fruit I'd been warned about. Dangerous sugars, small seeds sharp enough to cut the tongue. They'll return, I said. The Magus had a shard that swallowed light. Veilstone, Kalen confirmed. Used to pry at the seam between realms. He'll try to tear it, to drown us in something that doesn't belong here. He did not add, because of you. He did not need to. Teach me, I said before sense could stage a coup. Before he does. He nodded once, as if I'd said a piece he had been waiting on. Training was not spells. It was breath and bone and listening to threads most people spend their lives ignoring. He stood near enough that I could feel the temperature of him, and far enough that if I flared he might keep his skin. When he touched my wrist to correct a line, light woke with a warning purr. We both stood very still until it slept again. That night, through narrow windows, the sky bruised and ugly red. Horns called. Wolves answered. We reached the inner yard as the Magus lifted his staff and the air split like cloth. Through the tears something groped, a hand too many-jointed to be kind. Only Moonfire seals a wound like that, Kalen said, voice even. Only yours. If it spills onto you. He smiled then, quick and human. Then burn me faithful, Neva. We moved. He was shadow, I was light. The bond between us thrummed, not a leash, a rhythm. I poured everything the training had taught me into the rip in the sky. White fire braided itself with his cold will, and the scene drew shut with a cry like metal taught to sing. The yard rang with victory. The hunters broke. The Magus fled, staff cracked. I sagged to my knees, shaking and whole. Kalen knelt too, not touching until my fire softened to a glow. You are not a curse, he said. You are the covenant. And somehow, for the first time since I learned what my reflection costs, I believed him. Dawn found the stronghold bandaged in quiet, drifts tamped down, broken balusters stacked like bones, the yard scrubbed of blood until only an iron ghost remained. I walked the inner ring with a wolf at my hip, a she with frost on her whiskers who'd decided, unilaterally, that I was pack. Kalen said her name was Meyer. She accepted this, then butted my palm for a scratch that made one leg kick. We rebuild faster than we grieve, Kalen said, joining me along the parapet. It is a discipline and a flaw. What do you do with the grief you don't have time to feel? I asked. We return it to the mountain, he said, touching the stone. It keeps accounts. Meyer sneezed agreement. Far below, artisans replaced shattered crystals while sentries rotated like constellations. Inside me, the white hum had faded to an ember. I could find it now, reach, breathe, open, close. Not a door. A tide gate. I need to know what I am beyond a weapon, I said. Sacred is a shape I have never worn. Then you must see the well, he said, and the capital letter lived in the way he spoke it. Where the moon fell when it fractured. Where your line learned to listen. We took the slow way, stairs through blue ice, galleries of fossils like winged fishes frozen in stone. Isra waited at the lowest arch, her posture a blade. It is dangerous to bring the ember this close, she told Kalen without bowing. What she mends, she may unmake. What we ignore, we may lose, he said, and passed her. She smiled at me with courtesy that keeps score. The well was a lake sunk into the mountain's heart, surface black as onyx until light breathed across it, and stars bloomed beneath. Not reflections, memories. I knelt. The water listened. Ask, Kalen said softly. I swallowed. What am I, besides the thing they named me? The lake brightened as if the question itself were a lantern. Images rose, a woman with my white lashes lighting 1,000 candles from her hands, a child laughing snow into summer rain, a line of people walking nightward with purpose, not shame. Moo-born, the water answered. Not a curse. A covenant. I breathed on knuckles and watched steam ribbon away into blue. When I touched the well, it touched back. Cold climbed my fingers like ivy, blooming into a map on my skin, thin paths of silver that pulsed with my breath. I didn't yank away. I listened. Somewhere above, Isra's shifted. Disapproval rang like a dropped coin. What does it want? I asked. To be carried, Kalen said. Hoarded power rots. Moving power becomes river. The map on my hands resolved into 3 routes. The first led upward, bridges, ramparts, torches. Defense. The second sloped inward, archives, oaths, bones. The third arrowed outward into dark, a valley I did not know, a village I recognized with a start. My village. They will come for what they think they own, Kalen said, reading the map without touching. Hunters barter in debts and fear. If they cannot break a fortress, they break a story. My parents, I whispered, the words still a splinter. They will sell the same girl twice. Meyer pressed her head under my elbow. The well dimmed to a patient glow. I am not your jailer, Kalen said. Choose a path and I will match your step. Memory first, I decided, surprising myself. If I am to be something besides a weapon, I must know the old names. The archives were not shelves so much as weather-obeying catalog. Snow recorded voices. Frost preserved scribbles as delicate as moth wings. We walked among pillars of clear ice where Moonborn left marks, songs, recipes, battle plans, a lover's grin scratched thin. I pressed my palm to one and heard a woman laugh until she cried because the world had finally called her by the right word. Covenant, I said aloud, testing it on my tongue. Isra's voice drifted from the entry. Careful. Words make doors. Some things come through hungry. Then let them, I said. Above us the mountain exhaled. Crystals rang along ice like distant bell, and my fear loosened. I touched another, and heard a lullaby soft in the air. So. It keeps score. It settled in my bones. I felt placed, like a stone fitted into an arc. We trained under the south eave where the wind braided the banners into lessons. Kalen taught without ornament. Breath. Posture. Permission. He meant, breathe so the fire hears you, stand so fear cannot tip you, let the light work. When I failed, he did not flinch. When I succeeded, he did not preen. He nodded once, the way he did at sunrise. You are not my maker, I told him between drills. No, he said. I am your witness. At night, wolves nested at my door, a white drift of guardians. I dreamed less of the woman he had lost and more of the child I had been before shame trained my eyes down. In those dreams I spilled light into my cupped hands to count the bones of birds, to find needles lost by the hearth, to read when candles guttered. Ordinary miracles I hid because village law prefers suffering over wonder. On the 4th morning, a courier arrived from Frost-bound watch. The hunters had not retreated to lick their pride. They had circled. The Magus had found a higher shard of veilstone and a human ally who knew our gates, a woman with white blue hair and exacting pose. The words hit like a turned blade, Isra. I wanted to refuse the truth and failed. She stepped from the shadow of the messenger's account herself, efficient as an apology. My king, she said, not looking at me. Better I guide them into a trap than they wander. I have misled them to the south ravine, If you ride now, you can make ghosts of them by sundown. Or ride into your arithmetic, Kalen said mildly. The guards bristled like wolves. He sighed. Trust is a cord. Pull it too often and it frays. It holds, she said, and smiled with all her careful teeth. Kalen read the dispatch twice, then folded it like a blade to use again. I stood still and let fear pass like weather. When it cleared, ground remained. Between us hung silence counted, a kind you measure not in seconds but in choices. So. The ravine Isra named was a knife wound in the mountain, narrow and treacherous, walls glassed with avalanches. We approached under a lid of clouds so low Meyer ducked. Kalen's scouts ghosted ahead. Their hand signs said what mouths couldn't: quiet, iron, magic like wet ash. Back! One signed sharply, but the snow under us had already learned a new language, runes blooming in a circle, the kind that translate presence into cage. Down! Kalen barked. He rapped me as the sigil flared. The blast took us sideways instead of skyward. We hit hard, air leaving like a startled bird. Wolves howled. Hunters spilled from scrims of glamour, their cloaks shredding into true shapes. The Magus stood on a shelf of ice, staff crowned with the new shard, eyes lit by borrowed red. Bring me the moon girl, he said to the spell. It obeyed, tugging subtly at my bones. I reached for the door inside me. The light answered, but crooked, stuttering, snagged by glyphs salted into the snow. Isra had known where I would look. She had salted that thought too. Kalen rose with the kind of grace forged when a boy survives the night that kills his brothers. He cut 3 hunters in the time it takes to draw a sharper breath. Break the lines, he called to the scouts. Scratch them out with steel, with teeth, anything. Meyer lunged, paws striking sigils until they blotted. The pull on my bones eased. I opened the gate in my chest and asked the light to be river, not flood at first. It slid from my palms in braided currents, seeking seams in the spell. Where it found them, it sang. Where it didn't, it shone until weak magic forgot itself. We made ground there. The Magus snarled, then smiled past me. I followed the line of his delight and saw Isra on the far rim, expression sober, hand lifted, 2 fingers tracing a shape that could cut a king in half. Don't, I told her across the ravine, and poured light her way. Ice cracked like knuckles, and breath smoked at each oath we made. Hard. Our powers met, her cold geometry, my river, and both learned to bruise. Why? I asked, anger stripping the varnish off my voice. Because he will choose you, she said simply. Or mend him, I said, and let the river remember its source. Kalen leapt to the rim, boots finding holds old kings left. The Magus swung the staff to spear him. Meyer took the blow in meat and fury, teeth finding the Magus's wrist, jaws clamping until bone thought about yielding. The shard screamed. I gathered everything the well had taught me and shaped it not as a spear but as a seal. Light wants to burn, I asked it to bind. It spun from my hands in loops, latching to Isra's drawn sigils, climbing her careful math and turning locks until the mechanism refused its master. Her eyes widened, not fear, recognition. She had not misjudged my danger, she had misnamed my purpose. Go, I told Kalen without looking at him. The shard. He went. The Magus saw a white king coming and saw at last the error in his arithmetic. He tried to tear the ravine wider. Kalen cut the staff below the shard, moon steel shearing theft from source. The shard fell. I snared it in light before it could kiss the rune-salted snow. The cage dissolved. Hunters broke. Wolves chased. The ravine kept our secrets close. Isra stood very still, unarmed by her own precision. I crossed the frost between us until we shared breath in the white air. You can stand with us, I said, voice shaking with everything this might cost. Or you can keep a ledger until you die of it. She closed her eyes once. When she opened them, she knelt. Behind us, the shard pulsed like a captured star, and cracked. A hairline crack raced across it. Meyer growled. Steady, Kalen said. I breathed, and the caught star went quiet. The shard sat caged in light between my palms, humming like a heart that didn't belong to me. Even cracked, it vibrated with a hunger that wanted to chew through air and stone alike. Kaelin studied it as if reading an enemy's diary. It should be destroyed, Isra said quickly. Her voice had new weight now, not mockery, not icy contempt, but urgency. Or wielded, another counselor muttered, the amber-eyed Dominic, who had never disguised his suspicion. Why waste the blade when we face hunters that multiply? Kaelin's gaze silenced him. Weapons with wills of their own are not blades. They are bargains. And bargains collect. I looked down at the shard, its glow bleeding faint blue into my wrists. My fire kept it quiet, but every breath made the effort tremble. It whispers, I said softly. Not words, but promises. What kind of promises? Kaelin asked. That it could make me more than moonborn. That it could unmake the hunger in others. That it could give me control. I swallowed, ashamed of how much of me wanted to believe it. Kaelin reached forward but didn't touch me. Shards lie. They mimic the voice of what you crave most. That is why they kill so well. Dominic laughed under his breath. Or why they choose so well. The chamber tilted then, not with quake, but with sound. Far below, bells rang twice, sharp and strained. Warning. Meyer pricked her ears and rose. Hunters were not waiting to lick wounds. They were already at the gates. Kaelin nodded to me. Seal it, Neva. Hide it in the well until it cannot sing. I hesitated. When I closed my hands, the shard fought, trembling with frantic light. The well answered my call like a door swung wide, its water rising in a sheet of silver. I cast the shard into it. The lake shivered and dimmed, but held. The hum inside me quieted. Too quiet. Kaelin's hand touched my shoulder. They will come harder now. Without the shard, they must take you whole. The second siege began before dawn had shaken frost from the windows. Hunters marched with new ranks, lines disciplined enough to shame soldiers, their blades bright with runes re-etched in haste. At their center, the magus limped, staff broken but will unbroken. And beside him, a figure in a mask of bone who carried no weapon, only silence. The wolves bristled at that one. Meyer growled until her hackles snowed. Who? I whispered. A seeker, Kaelin said grimly. They do not fight with blades. They hunt threads of bond. The words chilled me deeper than winter. Bond. Mine. Ours. We stood again on the ramparts. The mountain was a throat-clearing for war. Kaelin lifted his sword, moonlight running its edge. You come to die twice, he called. Do you grow fond of failure? The magus raised his broken staff. We come to collect debt. The seeker's masthead tilted. No sound. Yet something tugged at me, inside, at the tether that bound my fire to Kaelin's steadiness. I gasped, clutching my chest. The bond strained like rope dragged over stone. They are unraveling us, Kaelin muttered, teeth bare. Stay near. But the nearer I stayed, the harder the pull. It was like a hook that wanted to rip us apart by making closeness into a wound. Hunters advanced, shields raised. Wolves lunged, vampires struck from above. Steel shrieked. And through it, the seeker walked slowly, mask unflinching, hand raised toward me. I staggered, fire lashing wild from my skin without command. It seared stone, not enemy. I can't hold it, I gasped. Kaelin caught me against his chest, arms steel around me. Then don't hold. Let it go where it belongs. The bond screamed, stretched near breaking. And then I saw, it wasn't a chain. It was a bridge. If the seeker pulled, I could push back. I reached not for fire but for Kaelin's pulse in the bond. He gave it freely. Together we shoved light down the tether. It ripped into the seeker's mask like sunrise. The figure staggered, shrieked, not with throat, but with the sound of something old unraveling. The mask shattered. Empty inside. A body only pretended. Hunters faltered. Wolves leapt. And the bond thrummed whole again. Afterward, The stronghold smelled of iron and wet ash. Kalen led me back into the hall while the others scoured for remnants. The bond still hummed between us, tender and raw, like skin after lightning. You steadied me, I said. You chose me, he answered, and in his tone was something fragile, almost human. Dominic waited near the council fire, expression sharp. You see now? He demanded of the others. She is no guest here. She is fulcrum. If she burns, he burns. If he falls, we all collapse. Is that protection? Or doom? Isra's eyes softened faintly, but her voice stayed cold. It is both. As prophecy always is. The chamber pressed in with judgment. I felt their fear coat me like tar. I wanted to scream that I had not asked for any of this, that their fate did not belong on my shoulders. Instead, I said, then teach me to carry it. The silence that followed was knife-edged. Then Kalen nodded once, as if he had been waiting years for that answer. So we will. Training shifted. No longer just breath and posture. Now he taught me to weave fire with restraint, to thread it into shields as well as spears. To listen for when light wanted to devour, and when it wanted only to guard. Wolves circled us like tutors. Meyer barked when I lost focus. Kalen corrected without touch, his voice enough to anchor me. One evening, after hours of failure that tasted like smoke, I collapsed into furs near the white fire. I will break you before I ever save you, I muttered. Kalen crouched nearby, gaze steady. Do you think I have not already been broken? The difference is whether we build something from it. He lifted his hand, not touching, only hovering. The bond hummed warm. You are not here to replace what I lost, Neva. You are here because the world is tired of waiting for us. The well called me in my dreams that night. I walked its edge barefoot, the water smooth as glass. Reflections rose, some mine, some not. The woman before me with the same lashes, laughing with Kalen, another time, another bond. You failed her, I accused, though I didn't know if the words were mine. The well's surface shivered. Not failure. Fate. And fate repeats until answered. When I woke, Kalen was already at the window, silver eyes catching the pale dawn. He looked worn, stripped of the crown long enough to be only a man. Did you love her? I asked, hating myself for the jealousy inside the question. Yes, he said, not flinching. Then softer. But not as I love you. The bond pulsed as if affirming him. My throat tightened. You risk everything to keep me near. What if prophecy lies? Then let us prove it false together. We stood close, not touching, the bond a breath away from consuming. My heart thundered with fear and longing at once. And I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I wanted to believe him. The hunters did not relent. Messengers brought word of villages burned, of roads salted to drive survivors toward us. The Magus was building an army from hunger itself. Each step he took was shadowed by whispers of a tear in the veil widening. We cannot wait for him to come again, Dominic said in council. We must hunt. And leave the fortress unguarded? Isra countered. That is exactly what he counts on. Arguments tangled like smoke. I sat silent, until Kalen's hand brushed mine under the table, unseen. He leaned close. You see the threads they do not. Speak. I swallowed, the fire restless in my chest. He follows my blood. Not the stone. Not the crown. Me. If I leave, he will chase. If I go with guard enough, with wolves enough, we can break him before he swells larger. The chamber erupted in protest. Too dangerous. Suicidal. He will trap you. Kalen's voice cut through. And yet she is right. Every eye turned. His silver gaze burned steady. I will ride with her. And any who wish to stand between prophecy and ruin may follow. The choice settled heavy. Wolves howled approval from the yard. My heart clenched. The bond thrummed hard enough to hurt. For the first time, the path was clear, not waiting, not hiding, but hunting the man who had tried to sell me twice. Preparation spun the fortress into motion. Wolves were saddled with harnesses threaded in silver. Vampires sharpened blades until sparks leapt like restless stars. I was given armor, not heavy steel but leather woven with moon thread, pale as my own hair, warm as fur. It fit as though someone had measured me years before. Kaelin watched me tighten the last buckle. Armor remembers its wearer. You are not the first moon-born to put that on. The weight of that history pressed against my ribs. Did she fall in it? He studied me a moment, then said evenly. She wore it into her last dawn. You may wear it into your first victory. Myers shoved her head under my hand, reminding me not to drown in ghosts. I scratched between her ears and forced a breath steady enough to convince myself. The column rode out at dusk. Wolves led, their breath clouding in rhythm. Vampires flanked with movements too disciplined to be called strides. They flowed. The forest bent around us, branches heavy with icicles, the air taut with waiting. Where will he be? I asked. The veil-thin places, Kaelin said. Old ground where shadow leaks easier. Your blood will know it. And it did. The closer we came to the southern valleys, the louder the hum in my chest. By midnight it had grown to a drumbeat. My fire twitched in my hands, restless. I clenched them until nails cut skin. Ahead, the trees broke open into a clearing drowned in red light. Runes smoldered across the snow, cut into spirals too exact for coincidence. At their center stood the magus, staff bound with ropes of iron around the cracked shard, and around him a host of hunters waiting like teeth in a jaw. He saw me. Smiled with a mouth full of promises. The Moonchild comes to us herself. Good. Saves me the trouble of burning villages until you begged. The bond thrummed. Kaelin's sword sang as it left its sheath. The first clash came with no trumpet, only wolves leaping, blades hissing, fire waking in my hands like a storm that had learned my name. The magus spoke words that broke air into shards. Hunters surged, shields alight with runes glowing amber. My wolves struck them, but silver-bitten steel cut even through fur. I pressed my palms forward, white fire spiraled out, catching runes mid-chant. They shattered, sparks hailing down like ruined stars. But the magus was already weaving. He didn't strike at flesh or stone, he struck at the tether. My chest convulsed, breath ragged. The bond between me and Kaelin twisted, pulled taut like cloth on fire. Stay with me, Kaelin barked across the chaos. His silver eyes cut through the storm, anchoring me. I tried. Every time I blinked, the magus's voice pressed in, he will fall. He will burn. You will be the one to unmake him. My fire surged, wild and scared, lashing even at those who fought for me. A wolf yelped when a stray flame seared its flank. I screamed in horror, clutching the blaze back. The magus laughed. See? She is ruin wearing skin. All you do is hasten the end, king. Kaelin charged him, blade flashing moonlight. Hunters fell before him like reeds before storm, but the magus's shard-drunk staff caught the blow. The impact flared so bright I stumbled back, blinded. Something changed then. The bond between me and Kaelin did not only hum, it burned. I could feel his breath, his pulse, the flex of his muscles as though my body wanted to mirror them. For one instant, we weren't two forces trying to hold. We were one. I reached through the bond and pushed my fire into his strike. His sword ignited white, brighter than moon or flame. The magus reeled, snarling, staff cracking deeper. Hunters broke formation, panic rippling like contagion. The shard screamed as Kaelin's blade split it clean through. Light exploded outward, not fire but raw absence, sucking air from lungs. Hunters fell, twitching. Wolves howled. The earth shuddered. When the light dimmed, the magus lay broken, staff ruined, eyes burned hollow. But something else stirred in the snow where the shard had fallen. Something darker. Something waiting. A fissure split open, jagged and wide. From it poured not hunters, not magi, but shadows shaped like men who had forgotten their bones. Their eyes glowed pits of coal. Their mouths dripped black smoke. Veilborn, Kaelin growled, pulling me behind him. The shard woke the breach. The bond pulsed harder, erratic. My fire thrashed against my ribs, eager, frightened, alive. I pressed my palms together. I can close it. You barely held a shard. Dominic snapped, cutting down one shadow that tried to climb the slope. This will eat you alive. She is the only one who can, Kalen answered. His gaze locked mine. But not alone. The breach yawned wider. The night itself seemed to bow toward it. Wolves snapped and tore, but shadows reformed from smoke. My light would need to be more than fire. It would need to seal. Trust me, Kalen said, sword planted at my side. His hand hovered near my arm, not touching but steady. I nodded once, heart a drum against bone. Together we stepped to the fissure. I opened the door and knee wider than ever before. Fire spilled white, searing across the snow, weaving itself into strands. Kalen's presence steadied it, molding shape from storm. The shadows screamed, clawing as the light bound them, dragging them back toward the breach. I poured more, my bones hollowing, every spark costing breath. Kalen fed me steadiness, discipline, an anchor to keep the river flowing. And then, with one last surge, the fissure sealed. The scream died. The night fell quiet except for panting wolves and the ragged chorus of our breath. I collapsed to my knees, shaking. Kalen dropped beside me, his hand braced against my back. His touch didn't burn. It steadied. You held the gate, he whispered. No, I rasped. We did. The march home was a blur of exhaustion. Hunters fled scattered, their ranks broken without magus or shard. Wolves limped but lived. The air itself felt lighter, as though the mountain had been exhaling for too long and finally found rest. But peace was brittle. The breach had been sealed, yes, but I could still feel its echo, a pressure behind my eyes, a pull at the edge of dreams. Veilborn didn't vanish forever. They waited. The fortress greeted us with firelight and bowed heads. For the first time, no one whispered curse when I passed. They whispered Moonborn. It didn't sting. It weighed differently, like a mantle, not a chain. In the council hall, Dominic pressed his fists to the table. This is proof. She is weapon, salvation, curse, all at once. How long before she burns him down as surely as she burned the breach? Enough. Kalen's voice cracked the air like frost. You will not speak of her as though she were steel to be melted. She is more than your fear can measure. I wanted to thank him, but my throat locked. I only met his gaze. Silver eyes softened, the bond humming warm. Later, alone in my chamber, I stood before the pale fire and let my armor slide from me. My wrist still bore faint silver veins from the well's touch. I pressed my hands together and whispered, Am I covenant or curse? The fire whispered back in crackling tones, Both. Always both. But chosen. And for the first time in my life, I chose to believe it. Dreams found me again, but not the well this time. The fractured moon filled the sky, both halves bright, tugging like twin tides. Between them stood Kalen, his cloak torn, his sword dripping light instead of blood. You should not be here, I said. You pulled me, he answered. The bond doesn't wait for permission when danger calls. Danger came fast, shadows boiling at the edges of the dream, faces stretching too thin. The breach again, echoing even in sleep. My fire rose without command, spilling from my hands until the dream itself glowed white. Kalen stepped into it, unflinching, his presence feeding the blaze. Together we held them back until the dream cracked into dawn. I woke with his hand around mine, silver eyes watching. He looked tired but alive. You dreamt, he said softly. You were there, I whispered. Always, he replied. Until this ends. The bond pulsed, stronger than ever, not fragile thread but woven steel and fire. And in that moment, I realized prophecy wasn't chains. It was a map. And we were still choosing how to walk it. The fortress didn't sleep after the breach. Sentries doubled, wolves prowled restless, and even the white fires burned taller, as though sensing the shadow press too near. I wandered the halls that night, unable to tame the buzz beneath my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the fissure yawning open again. Kalen found me on a balcony overlooking the valley. Snow fell quiet, hiding scars of battle. His cloak hung loose, hair silvered by moonlight. "You feel it too?" he said, not as a question. "Yes." I gripped the railing until frost bit my palms. "It's not gone. It's waiting. Veilborn never surrender. They circle patient. They will try again until they find weakness." "And if the weakness is me?" I whispered. "What if Dominic is right? If my fire unravels more than it mends?" Kalen turned, closing the space between us until his shadow folded over mine. His hand hovered near my jaw but didn't touch. "Then we teach it not to unravel. Fire is not born wicked. Fear makes it so." His gaze held me steady, and for a moment the buzzing inside quieted, tamed by certainty that wasn't mine alone. "You believe in me more than I do," I admitted. "Belief is the one wealth kings hoard poorly," he said with a faint smile. "So I give it where it belongs." The bond thrummed, warm against the cold night. I wanted to lean into it, to let the comfort swallow the fear, but wolves howled below, cutting the moment in half. Scouts returned, breath steaming, news heavy on their tongues. "Hunters regroup," they panted. "Not retreating. Rallying. And the Magus, he walks again." My blood iced. We had shattered him. Burned the shard. How could he stand? Kalen's jaw tightened. "Some debts don't pay in flesh. They linger in shadow." The night closed colder around us. At council, the news spread like wildfire on dry grass. Some wanted to seal every gate, wall ourselves in. Others demanded we march first, crush him before he could swell. Dominic's voice cut sharpest. "We cannot keep risking all for her. Every battle pulls death closer. This fortress is not her cradle. Nor her cage," Kalen answered, silver eyes slicing the room. "She is not weight. She is fulcrum." Their argument churned around me, louder, angrier. I sat silent until Isra leaned close, her voice low enough for me alone. "If you wish to silence them, Neva, show them you can lead. Speak, not as child nor curse, but as covenant." The word struck like a bell. Covenant. The well had whispered it. The fire inside me stirred, urging. I rose, my chair scraping like thunder. The hall quieted. "You all fear I'll break what I touch," I said, voice shaking but loud. "But it was my fire that sealed the breach. My fire that bound the shard. Hunters chase me, yes, but then let me be the bait. We hunt him, not hide. We choose where the fight burns." Gasps. Murmurs. Some furious, some startled. Dominic's glare could have split stone. But Kalen's face softened, pride burning steady. "Spoken like one who knows the mountain keeps score," he said. Isra's lips curved faintly. "So. She chooses." And just like that, the council swayed, not all, not fully, but enough. Preparations began before the echoes faded. We would ride again, this time not to defend, but to hunt the shadow where it nested. The journey south was colder, the land itself shivering under weight of veil magic. Villages lay hushed, doors barred, no smoke from hearths. Wolves carried messages faster than any scout. The Magus gathered more than hunters now. Mortals hungry for coin, creatures that slipped between skin and shadow, even deserters who once wore Kalen's banner. By the third night, the air itself ached with waiting. We camped at the edge of a glacial plain, fires burning blue-white. Wolves ringed us like breathing walls. I lay awake beneath firs, staring at stars fractured like the moon. Kalen sat beside me, sword resting across his knees. "You should sleep." "I can't," I admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him smiling with that hollow staff." "Then don't sleep," he said gently. "Rest in another way." He leaned closer, his breath misting near mine. The bond pulsed strong, steady. "Lean on me. Even kings bend under weight. Even you may." The words stripped me bare. I did lean my shoulder against his. For a long time, we watched the fire's breath together, silence heavier than words. My fear loosened, replaced by something more dangerous, want. When wolves stirred restlessly, Kalen looked toward the horizon. Tomorrow we march into his nest. If fate frays, promise me one thing. What? Do not waste breath regretting me. Use it to burn him down. I turned sharply. Don't talk as if. He met my gaze, silver eyes solemn. Prophecy or no, death is greedy. We spit in its face by choosing how we meet it. I didn't answer. I only gripped his hand, fire buzzing under my skin. If fate meant to take him, it would take me first. We reached the Magus's nest at dawn. A fortress not of stone, but of bone and shadow, carved into a gorge that stank of blood. Hunters lined its walls, their armor glinting with runelight. And on the highest ridge, the Magus stood, staff reforged with a new shard crowning it, larger and darker than before. My chest tightened. The shard we had sealed, this was its twin, unbroken. The Magus's voice rolled like thunder across the gorge. You bring the girl. You deliver me my covenant gift. She is no gift, Kalen roared back. She is judgment. Wolves howled. Blades lifted. The sky itself seemed to bend as forces collided. The battle that followed was not clash but cataclysm, wolves tearing, vampires striking like lightning, hunters answering with shields ablaze. Fire leapt from my palms, weaving shields of white light that seared through runescripts. But the Magus's shard cut through every strike. It drank my fire like water on thirst. With every spell he cast, the gorge cracked wider, shadows spilling like veins of oil. Kalen fought toward him, every step cost in blood. The bond stretched, pulling me with him. I followed, fire bleeding from my hands, desperate to reach before the shard swallowed us whole. The Magus raised his staff, laughter splitting the air. You cannot seal what the gods themselves broke. Yes, I shouted back, fire roaring. But I can burn what you stole. The bond surged, Kalen's sword flared, and together we struck. The clash was thunder and light. My fire poured into his blade, igniting it white-hot. The Magus thrust his shard staff to meet us. When steel met stone, the world cracked open. Light and shadow warred, coiling in midair, screeching with voices too old for words. My fire wanted to consume, the shard wanted to devour, and between them the bond screamed in my chest like a breaking bone. Hold! Kalen barked, muscles straining. Do not let it eat you. I can't. Yes, you can. With me. His silver eyes burned into mine. Not weapon. Not curse. Covenant. The words steadied me. I pushed harder, fire threading not to destroy but to bind. Slowly, agonizingly, the shard cracked, fractures racing across its dark heart. The Magus screamed, shadow pouring from his mouth as though he himself were unraveling. And then, with one last surge, the shard shattered. The explosion ripped through the gorge, flattening snow, scattering hunters like leaves. The Magus fell, his body collapsing into ash. The fortress of bone wailed once and caved into ruin. Silence followed. The kind that comes after storms. Wolves lifted their heads. Vampires stared. And Kalen, still standing with swords smoking white, turned to me. You did not burn me, he said softly, reverently. No, I whispered, chest heaving, fire still flickering on my skin. I bound you. The bond pulsed, not pain, not fear, but whole. For the first time, I didn't feel curse or chain. I felt chosen. The battlefield smelled of ash and iron. Snow melted in wide black scars where fire had licked. The hunters that remained scattered into the trees, leaving behind their dead and their broken runes. Wolves dragged the wounded into lines, their fur streaked with blood. Vampires moved like surgeons, swift, efficient, silent. I stood in the heart of ruin, my palms still glowing faintly, unable to slow my breath. Kalen's shadow stretched long beside me, his silver eyes fixed not on the dead Magus but on me, as if I were the only thing worth measuring in that moment. You bound the shard, he said, voice low, more wonder than command. Not even my line ever managed that. I shook my head. It wasn't me alone. It was us. The bond thrummed between us in agreement, as if proud of its own stubborn survival. Kalen's lips curved faintly, not a smile exactly, but something close. He reached out, not for my arm, not for my fire, but for my hand. I let him take it. His skin was cold as always, but this time it didn't feel like ice. It felt steady. Around us, Dominic watched with the kind of glare that wanted to be disbelief but was too shaken to fully hold. This doesn't end it, he muttered. Where there is one shard, there may be more. Where one breach opens, others can split. Then we seal them, Kalen replied, still looking at me. Together. The word together sank deeper than any fire. I tightened my grip, not sure if it was courage or desperation that kept me from letting go. That night, we did not return to the fortress. We camped in the ruins of the gorge. Fires burned high to chase back lingering shadow. Wolves pressed close, as though afraid the fissure might reopen. Kalen sat across from me, his sword laid aside, his presence heavy but not unwelcome. Rest, he told me. I don't know if I can, I whispered. Then let the bond rest for you. His silver gaze softened. I will keep watch. And for the first time in years I believed someone when they said I was safe. Dreams came, but not the ones that nod. This time, I stood beneath the fractured moon with Kalen at my side. No shadows crept. No fissures yawned. Only silence, vast and strange. Is this real? I asked him in the dream. No, he said. But bonds make their own truths. When I woke, dawn bled faint gold over the gorge. Kalen was still there, still watching. Wolves slept curled like snowdrifts. The air smelled cleaner, as though the mountain itself sighed relief. But the relief was short-lived. Scouts returned with grim tidings. Villages further south lay emptied, not burned, not plundered, emptied. Doors open, meals unfinished, no bodies, no blood. Only silence. Veilborn, Isra said, her voice tight. They are not dead. They are taken. The words clamped my chest like iron bands. Taken. As if whole lives could be swept into shadow and folded away. Kalen looked at me, the bond humming sharp. It is your fire they chase, but it is innocence they drag. If we do not follow, more will vanish. Dominic scowled. Every time we follow, we bleed. How many will you risk for her fate? Every one, Kalen said without hesitation. His gaze cut through Dominic until silence reigned. I wanted to argue, to tell him not to risk lives for me, but the memory of empty homes, cold food, broken toys stopped my tongue. My fire pulsed beneath my skin like it knew where it was needed next. Then we follow, I said, voice steady. And the bond thrummed in fierce agreement. The trail led us deeper than maps, into valleys where the sun rarely reached. Forests grew too thick, their trunks twisted as if they'd drunk shadow instead of water. Wolves whined low, uneasy. Even vampires stepped lighter, their grace edged with caution. At night, we heard them. Not the hunters, not even the Veilborn. We heard voices. Children laughing, women calling, men humming work songs. Familiar, too familiar. But when we chased, there was only mist. They want to break us before they fight us, Kalen murmured. Wear down spirit until blade is nothing. It nearly worked. More than once, I thought I heard my mother's voice calling my name. Not as curse, not as burden, but as daughter. My chest hollowed. My fire flared without command, lashing trees into flame before I wrenched it back. Kalen caught my wrists, holding steady but not forcing. It is not her, he said. They borrow voices to cut deeper. Tears burned hot. But I wanted it to be her, I admitted. His expression softened, grief carved into stone. Want is how they win. Need is how we fight. Need truth. Need each other. I leaned into him, the bond pulsing warm again, chasing back the shadows. For a moment, the voices faded. The next morning, we found the first true sign of the missing villagers, footprints leading into a cavern veined with eyes so black it swallowed torchlight. Wolves balked at its mouth. The air bled cold that tasted wrong. "This is it," Kalen said. His sword gleamed faint in the gloom. "The veil is thin here." And the bond between us thrummed hard enough to ache, as if preparing itself for another battle too large to name. Inside the cavern, light bent wrong. Our torches glowed dim, shadows longer than they should. The walls pulsed faintly, like a heart too slow to survive. Wolves whined but pressed on, their loyalty outweighing fear. We hadn't gone far when we heard them. Whispers. Dozens, hundreds, carried in the stone itself. They weren't screams, not yet. They were pleas. "Help. Please. Don't let it take us." I staggered, clutching my head. The voices were sharp as glass in my skull. My fire surged, answering without my will. Kalen steadied me, his presence a barrier. "They are trapped between," Isra said, studying the walls. "Not alive, not gone. Waiting. How do we free them?" I demanded. She hesitated. "Only moon-born fire can unlace the knot. But it risks tearing the veil wider." The choice landed heavy. Save them, and maybe doom us. Or leave them, and let the Magus' shadow feast. "I won't leave them," I said, teeth clenched. Kalen's silver eyes held mine. He nodded once. "Then I won't leave you." We reached the cavern's heart, a chasm of shadow stretching endlessly down. In its depths faint shapes moved, villagers, drifting like moths caught in glass. The Magus' voice echoed, faint but smug. "Thank you for bringing her to me again. The veil needed a key." He wasn't gone. He was here somewhere, feeding from both worlds. I pressed my hands together, fire sparking. The bond thrummed sharp. "Then let's burn the lock," I whispered. The Magus stepped from shadow itself, eyes hollow, body stitched together by smoke. His staff was gone, but in his hand burned the shard's twin, stolen from gods or graves. "You think yourself savior," he sneered. "But you are the wound. The veil bleeds because you breathe." My fire roared at the sight of him, desperate to lash out. Kalen's hand steadied my shoulder. "Not wound," he said. "Answer." The Magus raised the shard. Shadows erupted, clawing up the chasm walls. Wolves leapt, fangs finding smoke, vampires struck, but the creatures reformed endlessly. Only one thing could seal it. My fire. Our bond. Kalen drew his sword, silver eyes locked on mine. "Together, Neva. Not chains. Not curse. Covenant." I nodded, throat tight, heart blazing. We stepped to the edge. My fire poured from me, wild, but Kalen caught it, shaped it, wove it along his blade until steel burned like a star. The Magus lunged, shard screaming. We met him at the rim of the chasm. Fire and shadow collided, the cavern trembling. Villagers screamed in the stone, the veil cracking wider. I poured everything into the bond, into Kalen, into us. For a moment I thought it would devour us both. And then, light broke. White fire sealed the chasm, shadows screamed and vanished, and the Magus fell into dust, his shard shattered into silence. The cavern stilled. Villagers' voices softened into breath, into life. The veil closed. I collapsed, fire guttering. Kalen caught me before I fell into the dark. His voice was low, raw, filled with something more than triumph. "You are not curse. You are mine." And though fear still laced me, I didn't deny it. Not anymore. When we stumbled from the cavern, dawn was waiting. Real dawn, with gold breaking across the peaks and snow glittering clean. Behind us, the mountain groaned once, then went still, as if it had released something heavy it had carried for too long. The villagers emerged in small groups, dazed, some crying, some silent. Mothers clutched children who should have been lost. Men stared at their hands as if checking they were real. They whispered thanks, but their eyes slid past me to Kalen. I should have felt invisible. Instead, I felt the bond pulse warm, reminding me that their lives had been pulled not by his sword alone, but by my fire. By us. One boy tugged at my cloak. His eyes were wide, his voice trembling. Was it you who lit the darkness? I hesitated. Yes, I whispered. He smiled, small but fierce. Then you're not cursed. You're light. The words struck harder than any rune. I pressed my hands together to still their shaking. Kalen's gaze lingered, his silver eyes softer than the morning sun. But peace was brief. Scouts returned with grim news. The hunters had not fallen back entirely. They regrouped in the south, their numbers swollen with mercenaries promised silver and blood. And worse, other shards had been sighted. The Magus had not been the last. Kalen's jaw set hard. They will not stop until she is either bound or broken. I swallowed, my throat raw. Then we make sure they fail. The bond throbbed fierce agreement, as though it had been waiting for me to finally say it. We returned to the White Fortress to find it changed. Where once the halls had watched me with suspicion, now there was a hush of something different. Not acceptance, not yet. But all. Servants bowed lower, guards' eyes lingered longer, and the council kept their whispers tight. Still, Dominic's glare burned as bright as ever. Every battle leaves us weaker. And now the veil itself stirs. How many more before we collapse under the weight of prophecy? Enough, Kalen snapped. We are not collapsing. We are rising. His voice echoed through the hall, iron-bound with frost. I felt the bond stir like flame at his words, and when his gaze found mine, it steadied me. That night, he summoned me to the crystal chamber again. The white fire burned low, its glow soft against the carved ice. He didn't stand as king this time. He sat, his cloak discarded, his sword leaned against the hearth. You still fear it? He said quietly. The fire. I nodded, unable to lie. It burns too fast. It hurts when I let it out. I don't know how to hold it without losing myself. Then you will learn, he said simply. From who? I whispered. His lips curved faintly. From me. And so began the first lesson. Kalen didn't train me like the council might have, with drills and commands. His way was stranger, older. We began at dawn in the frost gardens, where the snow never melted and the statues watched like silent gods. Fire is not enemy, he said. It is hunger. Feed it truth, not fear. He made me stand barefoot in the snow, hands open, until my fire sparked in protest. My skin burned, steam rising, but he kept his distance, only watching. Don't cage it, he called. Shape it. I can't, I snapped, frustration cracking my voice. The fire surged wild, spilling out, igniting a statue's arm. I panicked, but Kalen stepped forward, his hand covering mine. The fire bent, curving back into stillness, as if his touch had taught it manners. You can't, he murmured, close enough for his breath to frost my cheek. But only if you trust it. And yourself? The bond pulsed sharp between us, heat and frost colliding until I trembled. I pulled away, afraid of what would happen if I didn't. But he didn't look angry. He looked patient. Again, he said. And again we tried. By the third morning, the fire no longer lashed blindly. It curved to my will, flickering across my palms like silk instead of claws. My veins still ached, but less. Kalen's gaze shone with something that made me both proud and terrified. Good, he said softly. Now you are beginning. But while we trained, the world outside darkened. Hunters spread south, gathering more than men. Rumors reached us of witches lending power, of kings bargaining with shards for armies that could not die. Dominic urged retreat. Seal the fortress. Defend only our own. Let mortals face their own monsters. Kalen shook his head. The veil touches all. If we turn away, it devours them, then us. His voice brooked no argument. Still, I saw the cracks. His shoulders heavy after counsel, his silver eyes shadowed in the nights. He bore the weight of prophecy as though it were carved into his bones. One night, When the fortress lay quiet, I found him alone in the frost gardens. His sword rested beside him, his head bowed, his hands folded as though in prayer. "You're tired," I said softly. He didn't look up. "I cannot afford to be." I hesitated, then sat beside him. The bond pulsed faint but steady, and I reached out, brushing my hand against his. He stiffened, then let it stay. "You don't have to carry it alone," I whispered. For a long moment, silence stretched. Then he turned his hand, lacing his fingers with mine. His voice was raw when he spoke. "I have carried it alone for lifetimes. Until you." The bond surged warm, steady. For the first time, he leaned into me, not as king, not as alpha, but as man. And I let him. Our peace shattered days later. Scouts burst into the council hall, frost clinging to their cloaks, terror sharp in their eyes. "They've taken the Black Pass," one gasped. "Hunters, witches, beasts not of this world. The pass burns." The Black Pass was more than stone. It was the only road connecting south to north, the only path mortals used to trade, to flee, to live. If it fell, whole kingdoms would starve behind walls of snow. Dominic's face blanched. "We can't fight on two fronts. If they hold the pass, we lose the south." Kalen rose, silver eyes blazing. "Then we take it back." Gasps rippled through the hall. "It's suicide," Isra said sharply. "It's survival," Kalen snapped. His gaze cut to me. "And it must be you, Neva. Only your fire can unmake what they've sown there." The bond thrummed, hot and insistent, already pulling me toward the flames waiting in the pass. My chest tightened with both fear and certainty. "I'll go," I said, voice steady. The hall erupted in protests, but Kalen silenced them with one raised hand. His gaze never left mine, fierce and unyielding. "We go together," he said. And I knew in that moment, the Black Pass would decide more than war. It would decide us. The Black Pass roared like a wound. Smoke choked the sky, the cliffs wept fire, and shadows writhed along the stone like veins of night. Hunters lined the ridges, their ruined weapons glowing red, while witches chanted in tongues that scraped the air raw. At the center stood a rift, wider than any before, its edges bleeding black flame. We climbed the ridge together, Kalen at my side, wolves flanking, vampires in grim silence. Every step felt like walking into the heart of prophecy. The bond thrummed so fiercely I thought my chest might shatter. The hunters saw us and jeered. The witches raised their arms, feeding the rift. A beast of pure shadow clawed its way out, eyes burning like molten pits. The pass shook under its weight. Fear clawed at me, but Kalen's voice cut through. "This is not curse," he growled, silver eyes blazing. "This is what you were born for. Not to burn me. Not to break. To stand with me." The bond surged, wrapping fire and frost together, until it no longer felt like two forces but one. I stepped forward, lifting my hands. My fire answered, not wild, not cruel, but steady. It poured into the rift, white flames swallowing black, searing the beast until it howled and dissolved into ash. The witches screamed, their power unraveling. Hunters faltered, their runes dimming. Kalen leapt into the chaos, his blade glowing like moonlight forged into steel. Together we struck, the bond guiding every step, every strike, until the rift collapsed with a thunderous crack. Silence fell. The Black Pass stood scarred but closed. The enemy fled into the snow, leaving only smoke and ruin behind. I staggered, fire dimming, my knees weak. Kalen caught me, his grip fierce, his voice raw. "You did it." "No," I whispered, meeting his silver gaze. "We did." The bond pulsed warm, no longer a chain or burden, but a choice I had made. For the first time, I believed it. Not curse. Not mistake. Destiny. As the dawn rose over the ruined pass, Kalen bent close, his breath brushing mine. "Then let the world come," he murmured. "So long as you are mine, I will never fear it." And though the mountains still trembled, and the veils still whispered, I knew this was only the beginning. But it was our beginning.